More fallout from allegations against the president's Supreme Court pick. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. The president is standing by the nominee tonight, saying Judge Brett Kavanaugh is, quote, somebody very special.
But assault allegations from more than 30 years ago could be putting the Supreme Court nomination in jeopardy.
CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has the story.
Well, John and Jenna, the White House is standing with their pick for the high court. Democrats are calling on committee chairman Senator Charles Grassley to delay Thursday's scheduled vote until members can get more answers into these allegations. This as Judge Brett Kavanaugh again today says the story is not true. The allegation against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh became more of a threat after his accuser publicly spoke out. Christine Blasey Ford came forward accusing the judge of sexually assaulting her at a high school party in the early 80s. Ford first shared her story in July with Senator Dianne Feinstein seeking anonymity. Feinstein later gave it to the FBI. The Washington Post reports Ford took a polygraph test administered by a former FBI agent in early August and concluded that Ford was being truthful. Ford says she's willing to tell her story to the Senate Judiciary Committee.
She should not be ignored. She should testify under oath, and she should do it on Capitol Hill.
Kavanaugh is prepared to appear as well and continues to deny the allegation, saying, "This is a completely false allegation. I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone because this never happened. I had no idea who was making this accusation until she identified herself yesterday. I am willing to talk to the Senate Judiciary Committee in any way the committee deems appropriate to refute this false allegation from 36 years ago and defend my integrity." Some Senate Republicans believe this is all a ploy by Democrats to delay the vote.
The reality is the left knows their only ability to impose their agenda on America is through the courts. That's why they are fighting tooth and nail to stop this president in his nomination and confirmation of justices, especially the Supreme Court.
But Republican Senator Jeff Flake says Ford must be heard and that he's not comfortable moving ahead with the vote on Thursday if we have not heard her side of the story or explored this further.
I think he's on track, yeah. I mean, I think he's very much on track. If they delayed a little bit just to make sure everybody's happy, they want to be happy. I can tell you, the Republican senators want to be 100% happy themselves. They're doing it very, very professionally. Again, this should have been brought up a long time ago.
That scheduled vote on Kavanaugh's nomination might not happen Thursday, as we wait to hear if and when the committee might hear testimony from Ford and Kavanaugh. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Ben. Our Capitol Hill correspondent, Abigail Robertson, joins us now. Abigail, what are you hearing up on the Hill?
Well, a lot of senators on both sides of the aisle are saying this is a very serious charge that needs to be looked into before moving forward. And as Ben said, both Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford are prepared to testify before the committee about this incident, but no dates have been set yet. And if those testimonies end up happening, they might not be done in public. But in the meantime, a few Republicans who are pretty safe yes votes on Kavanaugh's confirmation say they want to hear from both parties involved as soon as possible.
One name that we're hearing a lot of is Susan Collins, the senator from Maine. What can you tell us about her and where she stands on this?
Well, she tweeted earlier that she thinks Professor Ford and Judge Kavanaugh should both testify under oath before the Judiciary Committee, and a lot of other senators are agreeing with that statement as well.
And some are calling for a delay in this. They want to hear from this woman. What's the timeline looking like, Abigail?
Well, Chairman Grassley's office has not announced a new timeline yet, and they're trying to stay on track with that Thursday committee vote. But with the Senate off for Yom Kippur on Wednesday, if both Kavanaugh and Ford end up testifying before the committee, it's unlikely that vote will happen on Thursday, but we'll see.
Yeah, you know, and there's a lot of controversy about the timing of this letter and when it came out, because Dianne Feinstein, senator from California, she had this letter back in July. What's your sense up there with the frustration and how some of the more conservative senators are feeling?
Yeah, Chairman Grassley's office says it raises a lot of questions about the tactics and motives of the Democrats that they just now brought these accusations to light when Senator Feinstein has had the letter and known about this since July. And Grassley says if Feinstein really took this claim seriously, she should have brought it to the attention of the full committee much sooner instead of waiting until the hearing process finished and they were on the eve of this committee vote. And the president echoed that sentiment earlier, just a few minutes ago, saying this should have been brought up long before now.
Yeah. Abigail Robertson live on the Hill for us. Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you.
Carrie Severino of the Judicial Crisis Network joins us now for more. Carrie, what do you make of these allegations and the fact that the woman making them now has taken the step to come forward?
Yeah, what we've seen here is allegations that are totally at odds with what we have seen so far of Judge Kavanaugh's character and reputation. You've got, someone who's been in public life for 25 years, undergone 6 different background checks in that time. There's never been a whisper of misconduct in any of those. You've got women who have already been on the record from every stage of his career, who've known him at all these different times, who have said, this doesn't sound like the Judge Kavanaugh we know. And now 65 women came out that know him from high school saying, the Kavanaugh we knew was someone who was very respectful with women. That doesn't sound consistent with him. On top of that, his own personal, unequivocal denial that this is what happened. I think it also, when you take in the context of how Senator Feinstein herself treated these allegations, she had them since July. She did not bring them up in front of the Judiciary Committee. She didn't bring them up when she herself was interviewing Judge Kavanaugh. She didn't bring them up in the closed session of the judiciary hearing that is off the record, so could have protected the confidentiality. She wasn't treating these as if she found them credible or serious or relevant. And I think it's so strange now to see that at the very eve of the vote, now suddenly a lot of people are using them to say, now we need to delay.
A lot of people are talking about the timing. However, there are Republicans who are on the committee who are suggesting that maybe the right thing to do is to delay and hit the pause on the vote to take some time to investigate and hear from both Judge Kavanaugh and his accuser. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I think it's clear that we've heard the White House and the Senate Judiciary Committee say we want to make sure we give a chance for both sides to tell their side of the story and get questioned by senators. I think the question is, does that become then a dilatory process? Are we going to use this to just slow walk things, or can we go and actually have the investigation and then move on? What I'm seeing is a lot of the Democrats are using this simply, and these are the same people who were saying back in July, let's delay this, let's not have a vote. They were saying it in August, they were saying in September. We can't let it be a just purely political using this allegation as a delay tactic. I think giving both sides a fair chance to hear things can be done, and still can be done in a reasonable manner that it doesn't end up dragging on.
Carrie, perfect segue into my next question. This has already been a highly partisan confirmation process. Do you think that this is just another example of that?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, last week, Justice Ginsburg was interviewed before all this stuff even started breaking the way it is now. And she was interviewed by a former clerk talking about her confirmation process. Remember, she worked for the ACLU. She was very active in liberal causes and feminist causes. She got confirmed with only 3 votes against her, virtually unanimous. Justice Scalia, similarly, very committed to his judicial philosophy. On the opposite side, he was confirmed unanimously. She said the way it was done then was better. The way it's being done now is not right. And she was very critical of the circus we had seen up until now in the hearings, which already was really an offensive thing to watch, I think, in many ways, the way it was being used for demagoguery rather than even looking into the candidate. I'm afraid this is just another step in that process. And even the Democrats seem to be using this woman's allegations as more of a partisan ploy, as a delay tactic, than really even taking it seriously.
Carrie, I just want to ask you, Politico is now reporting that the Judicial Crisis Network is getting ready to spend $1.5 million in TV ad campaigns that will feature a longtime friend of Kavanaugh's. Is this in any way a sign or signal that perhaps his supporters think that his nomination is now in jeopardy? Do you think that he'll be the next Supreme Court justice on the Supreme Court?
Oh, I definitely do. What it is illustrating the very purpose that we exist, which is to make sure that for nominees in this kind of position who are faithful to the Constitution, faithful to the rule of law, and therefore getting a lot of attacks from the left, that there's someone there to be an advocate for them. We've run lots of ads talking about Judge Kavanaugh up until now, and this is just the latest, trying to make sure people are aware of who he is and aren't just listening to the smears and the slurs from the other side.
Carrie Severino, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Have a great day.
In other news, the aftermath of Hurricane Florence continues. The storm is responsible for at least 23 deaths in North and South Carolina, as hundreds of thousands are still without power. Amber Strong has more.
Now a tropical depression, the remnants of Hurricane Florence are still lashing the Carolinas.
What we're dealing with is probably the most catastrophic disaster that this county has seen in the last 50 or 60 years.
The powerful storm and heavy rain leaving more than 500,000 in the dark and prompting hundreds of water rescues, like this mother and baby saved by the Coast Guard.
We got you, no rush.
But in Wilmington, North Carolina, firefighters prayed outside the scene where a mother and her 8-month-old were killed when a tree crashed into their home Friday. The injured father was taken to the hospital. Teams like the National Guard, the U.S. Marine Corps, and volunteer groups like the Cajun Navy and the New York Fire Department are all on the scene.
When you can help your fellow man, when you can get out there and do what you're trained to do, that's a great thing.
North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis says the economic impact on the Tar Heel state will be long-lasting.
The agriculture industry, the largest industry in our state, is hard hit. We're going to have to sort out the crop damage.
Federal government saying the recovery process will take a full team effort.
It's locally executed, state managed, federally supported, and that's the model that we shoot for.
Also warning other states to beware as the effects of Florence continue inland.
We're also anticipating you're about to see a lot of damage going through West Virginia all the way up to Ohio as this system exits out.
President Trump says he's pleased with the comprehensive recovery response so far, tweeting, FEMA, first responders, and law enforcement are working really hard on Hurricane Florence. As the storm begins to finally recede, they will kick into an even higher gear. Amber Strong, CBN News.
Thanks, Amber. Well, CBN News national security correspondent Eric Rosales has been in North Carolina since before Florence hit last week.
That's right. He joins us now from downtown Wilmington. Eric, what is it like there in the wake of this storm?
Well, I tell you what, guys, it is very sweaty right now, and it's very sweaty right now. You know, we're not out of the woods just yet, and the reason for that has to do with the river just down the street over here. All the water that's from the mountains and everything goes down into the Cape Fear River, and that Cape Fear River is expected to rise. We just ended up receiving a news conference from the mayor, and he says that it could actually rise either Tuesday or Wednesday, so that is not good news, and it could actually flood more things inland. Take a look.
The storm is speeding up as it exits the Carolinas, but it's still dumping rain, lots of it.
More than 30 inches in some places.
Rescue teams are out in full force, pulling about 1,000 people from their flooded homes, and shelters are overwhelmed. Wilmington is now cut off, and officials are planning to fly food and water into the city of 120,000 people.
This storm has never been more dangerous than it is right now.
Neighborhoods look like a war zone, roadways impassable, streets are a maze of fallen trees.
The next half of the tree went and hit the roof, knocked the chimney down onto my first floor den, and that knocked a hole in the roof.
While nature is punishing the Carolinas, neighbors from nearby states are stepping up to help. These men traveled from Tennessee, small business owners who say they are just doing what God wants them to do.
Just seems like the right thing to do. You know, help people out. You know, they got to be able to get back to their homes. They can't do that unless we clean it up.
Just the need to give back. You know, Lord's blessed us, we bless others.
I've driven around the town a little bit. I can see how badly we've been hit. It's going to take a lot of people like this coming down to help us recover. We ain't going to be able to do it by ourselves.
That's right. It's all about being the hands and feet of Jesus out here. We've witnessed a number of people doing that, helping each other. Carolinians are definitely resilient, guys.
Wow, just devastating scenes that you captured there in your story. Eric, I know that you've got FEMA and you've got the Coast Guard out there. Tell us a little bit about the federal government response. What have you seen?
Right. Actually, we have some good news to report. We actually just came back from seeing about 20 semi-trucks with huge tires. They were able to make it through the flood zone areas along with a state trooper escort. They brought in 20 semi-trucks that will be able to feed some 60,000 residents here in the county over the next 4 days. And they have enough food and water for 60,000 residents over the next 4 days. And who knows, that may even help us because we're starting to run out of food here. And you go to the market and there's nothing. The shelves are bare, along with no gas.
Yeah, Eric, tell us how the community there has really come together to each other's aid.
Oh, they certainly have. You know, I mean, I got to tell you, the Southern hospitality is definitely out. They actually, some of them made biscuits with whatever they could and then brought them into the hotel, and we've been able to have biscuits with them and share stories about previous hurricanes. And it's just people coming together and helping each other. In the story, we talked to those two men from Tennessee. They own their own business and they ended up just wanting to help out the people. So they do that, and they just come and they start clearing away the streets. Nobody told them to. They say, just God.
Just God. All right, Eric Rosales for us in Wilmington, North Carolina. Eric, thank you. Well, we'll be right back after a quick break. Today is Constitution Day, a day Americans celebrate the signing of the U.S. Constitution. And while this holiday definitely gets less fanfare than the 4th of July, it is arguably just as important. The Constitution is the country's blueprint for governing and spells out its 3 separate branches and system of checks and balances. It was signed on this day in 1787, 11 years after the U.S. gained independence. Since then, 27 amendments have been added to the Constitution.
Well, the separation of power, checks and balances, limited government, and individual rights. Those are all key tenets of the Constitution. But is America in danger of losing those founding principles? Well, David Brody sat down to discuss the issue with one of the country's leading conservative voices.
As the Patriot, Mel Gibson may have played the movie role, but national author, TV, and radio personality Mark Levin wants to bring that persona to the modern-day world via the airwaves.
This is Levin TV. I'm Mark Levin. Where we are not fair and balanced, we are 100% pro-American and patriots here.
His book, Rediscovering Americanism, provides to Americans clues to this country's structural founding and the progressive philosophy trying to fundamentally destroy it.
People are curious about their country. They're curious about its founding. They're curious about liberty. They don't hear a lot about it. You turn on TV, you never hear about it. The culture never discusses it.
Levin rights that wrong by going deeper into the writings of top liberal philosophers and thinkers in order to reveal their true agenda.
The early progressives, like Wilson and Crowley and these fellows, they relied on philosophers like Marx and Hegel and Rousseau, all of whom reject the notion of the laws of nature and nature's God. Now that phrase, those phrases, are in our Declaration of Independence. They're not even taught in most public schools. They're certainly not taught in universities and colleges. Yet that goes to the core of our founding.
Levin says rejecting natural law means progressives reject a vital part of civil society.
There are universal laws. There are universal eternal truths, right and wrong, good and evil, a moral order. People are to be virtuous and prudential and be temperate and so forth and so on. And what does it mean, universal truths? Well, these God-given universal truths. Man can't make them, man can't take them away, whether it's in the form of a legislature or a dictator or a vote of your community.
Levin points out President Woodrow Wilson as one of the biggest offenders who espoused a progressive doctrine before taking over as commander-in-chief.
Woodrow Wilson relentlessly attacked separation of powers. He relentlessly attacked the principles of the Declaration. He dismissed them. He dismissed the Declaration as a revolutionary document by pioneers that have nothing to do with a modern and complex society, as he had to be a progressive.
Levin says progressives believe rewriting American history will allow them to create a monster government where the state and individual become one. In other words, a world where elites know best, not you.
Let me ask you a question about that. With this massive administrative state, how are these people experts? They're part of the civil service. They're part of a public sector union. Some of them have their jobs because of seniority. Some of them have them because of affirmative action. Is it based on training? Is it based on Ivy League schools? Is it based on experience? So the whole myth that government's filled with these experts who are noble, who are going to find, who are going to improve health care and education and so forth, it's been a myth. It's been a lie from day one, from their philosophers to their thinkers to their current politicians like Bernie Sanders.
Levin says elitism leads to government-created rights never intended by our founders.
Our colonists didn't fight a revolution for health care and food and shelter. They figured, we'll take care of that. We want our liberty. We want our freedom. We do not engage in the battle of ideas, not so much against elites, but elitism. We're going to lose, because most societies are formed by the elites, by the intellectuals, by the academics, whether we like it or not.
You could say this book issues a dire warning: rediscover Americanism or risk losing our country's reason for being. Another example of Levin seeking to play the role of patriot, or possibly that of modern-day founding father, if there were such a thing.
Have you ever thought about going back in time to a certain period in history and where you might,
Yes.
where you would, I had a feeling you might have thought about that. What period of history would have that been?
I would have loved to have been a delegate at the Constitutional Convention. And sometimes I think to myself, I was born at the wrong time. I really do. That the birth of a nation, to have an impact at the birth of a nation, not that I would have done any better, but just to participate in that, I can't think of anything other than family. I can't think of anything more glorious. And so I think that would be it.
What about being a truth teller today, though?
History will judge.
Mark Levin using pen, microphone, and today's media as his weapons to keep the dream of America's founders alive. David Brody, CBN News.
The miraculous story of how one Missouri boy survived what should have been a deadly fall. Miracle boy and medical marvel. That is how people are describing a young Missouri boy who fell face first into a meat skewer and survived.
Well, Jenna, I had the chance to visit the little boy and his family over the weekend in Kansas City, and he told me he's just grateful to be alive.
Fifth grader Xavier Cunningham feels like a kid on top of the world. A far cry from where he was just a week ago, recovering from major surgery with his life hanging in the balance. The nightmare began at a treehouse behind the family home, where a swarm of hornets started to sting Xavier and his friends. Xavier fell onto a nearly foot-long metal rotisserie meat skewer below, piercing him through the left cheek right to the back of the skull. Amazingly, it missed his brain, spinal cord, and any major nerves. 3 days after his operation, doctors cleared him to return home.
He woke up, everything was just precious to him. It's still precious, just the little things, the sunrise. He had to turn to watch it, and he would just start crying. He's like, it's beautiful.
And 2 days later, we were with him when he ventured out for Friday night football. Xavier knows that his story is nothing short of a miracle, and he credits that to his faith in Jesus.
So when you're just getting to know Jesus, you're like, oh, he saved us. He gave his life for us, and but after this, it's just like he truly is the God Almighty.
Xavier, there's anything else you want to say?
Just stay strong and don't be afraid if anything like this happens.
An amazing kid who's going to have an amazing testimony to share for the rest of his life.
No kidding. I mean, just seeing that he only has what appears to be a Band-Aid or a bandage after that is
small scar.
A miracle.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for today's Faith Nation.
Have a great day.